we do get into our first combat scene with these code talkers. I gotta say, really reminded me of the opening scene of Tropic Thunder with the war scenes, the action scenes in this movie. They seem a little bit over the top, a little bit like explodey, gruesome, people on fire, guts spilling out. Sergeant Lincoln Osiris. There's even a couple. Cover me, you lip-dick fuck-ups!
Specifically, I wrote down Tropic Thunder. There's the slow motion part where Nick Cage has the machine gun and he's like just spray, like
dude, no way,
spraying.
Can I read you my notes?
Yes.
Verbatim. War scenes remind me of Tropic Thunder, especially with a screaming Nick Cage and slow motion people on fire.
Yes.
This is Tropic Thunder. What's poppin', corn dogs? We back. Season 2, episode 2. It's your boys from Just Play It podcast. I am James, a.k.a. Jimmy Crack Corn, Jimmy Crack Popcorn.
And I am Nick, a.k.a. the corn dog himself. That's what I'm calling myself.
That's my corn dog. I am the Poppy Popcorn McPopperson. Welcome back to the Just Play It podcast. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Instagram and YouTube at Just Play It podcast. Twitter at Just Play It pod. Nick, what are we tweeting these days? I don't have a Twitter.
No, we're just tweeting out our episode promos, little teasers here and there. If you want to follow along, maybe get a little taste of what's coming, you should follow us on Twitter.
A little Twitter tingle teaser is what you're saying?
And it's the best place to interact with us. If you have thoughts on an episode and you disagree with us, come into the Twitter comment section so I can roast you. Tweet me.
I dare you to come at Nick like that.
So, yeah, just trying to spread the good word.
You can't outcorn the dog, as they say. Yeah, and if anybody wants to sponsor us, DiGiorno, I know you're listening. Offer still out there. If you want to throw money our way, I will gladly upload more content. For the meantime, we are just pumping out promos for our episodes. Like I said, this is season 2. We are back from our break. And we are in the 21st century this week. This one actually came up on our list because we thought it was a bomb. But after developing our mathematical procedure, mathematically by the JPI standards, this is not a bomb. But we decided to keep it on the list. Now, you have seen this movie before, and you liked it, as you can remember?
Yeah, we'll get into my thoughts having watched it a second time.
From memory, I think you said, yeah, that was a good movie.
Let's announce the movie, and then I'll say a little piece. So the movie we're watching this week, or we watched this week, we'll be reviewing, is 2002's Windtalkers, starring Nicolas Cage, Adam Beach, and Peter Stormare.
It's also got Christian Slater in it and
young Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah.
So the movie, if you're familiar with the story behind it, is based on true events in World War II, which was using Navajo Indian dialect to send and decode messages. I love the idea.
That's such an interesting phenomenon, and there's so much to dive into there.
Yeah.
But what a big brain play by the U.S. government back in WWII.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously with today's security protocols, you can send things a lot simpler. But back then, when all you had was a radio, you had to
tune in and figure out where we're sending tanks.
I love the idea of the story behind this movie so much that I think I always loved this movie because, like you were saying, it's such a cool idea and it's such a unique moment in U.S. history to, historically not treated well population in the American Indians, and then saying, hey, you guys are extremely useful. Could you help us? And then them coming in and helping. So love the story behind it. We'll get into, I don't remember the movie other than the premise of the Code Talkers, which is why I always enjoyed it when I was younger. We'll get into what we think of it now. That's about 45 minutes from now after we go through this.
So this movie is directed by John Woo. And Nick, I think we were both jumping into this guy's IMDb page. Mm-hmm. Looks like he directed a lot of action movies. One of them being a fellow Nick Cage joint with Face Off, a movie that is on our list and we will watch at some point.
Yeah, Nick Cage has a little history of this being he likes to work with the same people. You'll notice in a lot of Nick Cage movies, if he has a director, he's probably directed or been a part of one of his previous action films. When it came time for casting, Nick Cage was up there and they said, yeah, I'll go work with John Woo again, because Face Off was a wildly successful action movie for Nick Cage.
Face Off, Mission Impossible 2, a movie called The Killer, which is highly reviewed. He is at the helm for Windtalkers. Like you said, we do have Adam Beach in this. I recognize this actor from another movie called Smoke Signals, directed by Chris Eyre. A lot more based on the modern day Native American or American Indian, but it was mostly about family dynamics, and it wasn't all about Native American tribes or anything like that. It was just a Native American director about Native American people, but it's not like, oh, it's a big deal. It was just like a regular story, and I enjoyed it. And then I also recognized him from Joe Dirt.
That's where I was going to say I recognize him. He is the fireworks salesman in Joe Dirt.
Yeah. So that, which is a little bit on the opposite end of the pendulum there for what he casted for, as opposed to Smoke Signals. Adam Beach, man, he usually pops up as if someone needs a Native American male. This guy always pops up. And for the sake of this podcast, I think we're just going to refer to that culture as American Indians or Native Americans. There's such a convoluted history with those people in this country, whether you want to say indigenous people, Native Americans, American Indian. It's really onto the preference of the individual you're talking to, but just for the sake of this podcast, I'll be saying Native American, referencing Native American people when talking about this movie, just because it is a focal point.
Oh, the push-pull of the culture. Yeah. Obviously.
Yeah, it's a little bit more heavy-handed on the action side of things, but, that's what we're going to get into when we start breaking down this movie. Like we said, it was almost a bomb, but technically it wasn't. This had a budget of $115 million, but it only brought in $77 million. So not quite a disaster bomb, but not good.
Yeah, you lose $40 million. Someone at the studio's upset.
So to start us off, I'm going to read this log line. 2 U.S. Marines in World War II are assigned to protect Navajo Marines who use their native language as an unbreakable radio cipher. Great hook there. I'm in.
It's right up there. It's up front, right off the bat.
Should we jump into plot talk?
Let's party, amigo.
Plot talk.
So we open up on our main character here. It's Joe Enders. This is Nicolas Cage's character. And we are on the Solomon Islands in the South Pacific Theater out in Japan. They're trying to protect this marsh area, this very jungly clearing, and I think they're trying to hold an LZ. And we could tell that Joe Enders, we'll just call him Joe here, is in charge of this battalion of men. And things are just not going their way. They've run out of ammo. They're getting ambushed by all sides, out of the trees, man, the trees. And Joe is just kind of shell-shocked. His guys are just dying left and right. They're saying, we need to fall back. Joe says, no, we're Marines. We were given an order. We need to stick to the order. This is the directive. Everybody dies except Joe. His whole squad dies. And he takes a grenade to the side of the face, to his ear. And then the next we see him, we are in a naval hospital, and he can barely walk because his equilibrium's so messed up because he has a ruptured eardrum. All he wants to do is get back out there and fight. He's a soldier. He's a Marine. This is his whole personality. Now, we're introduced to this nurse, and it's almost like they tried to shoehorn in this little subtle, I wouldn't even call it a B plot. It's like a D plot sub-story of him and this nurse.
We skip over the B and C plot and go straight to the D plot.
It's referenced 3 times the whole movie.
And this is Rita, the character, right?
Yeah.
And she's way down on this billing list. That's how not important that side story was to this movie.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It was very odd.
This is Frances O'Connor, who plays Rita. She's like a nurse, almost love interest of Joe.
I mean, yeah, we can call it a love interest, but there was really no love given or reciprocated.
I just care for you. She keeps writing him letters,
Yeah,
which he doesn't read in the
and
movie.
she's like, you're gonna leave the hospital without buying a girl a drink. It's like, are you guys together, or is she just flirting
I got
with
my ear
you?
blown off, lady. What do you? Yeah, you think this is a game?
It's wildly confusing.
Because I'm not having a good time. We are introduced to the character of Ben Yazzie and Charlie Whitehorse, who are new recruits. They're new privates joining the Marines, joining the cause. And we learn that they are going to be part of the Code Talkers, what you call it, initiative plan.
Program, yeah, something in that.
Is Windtalkers the real life code name for this operation, or was that just the name for the movie? Because I think Code Talkers is like the name of the actual operation.
Yeah, the Navajos were eventually referred to as Windtalkers. Like that was like an unofficial nickname they had in the Marines. Like the Navajo were the.
What's the meaning behind the name? Is it because of radio waves?
That's a great question. They did reference it in the movie at one point. There's little moments where you can hear the Navajo talking on the radio. It's kind of an overlay.
Researching this movie, all I see is Navajo Code Talkers. I don't see anything that says Wind Talkers. So I don't know if that was like some Hollywood BS, like a stereotype, like, oh, like the Native American people speak to the wind. They're wind talkers. They're very spiritual. I didn't know if it was like some Hollywood BS or if that's what they were actually called.
Yeah, if the movie's correct, I don't know if it is, but the little voiceover that the two Navajo guys had while they were talking said, this is when it gets translated from Navajo to English, they're being called wind talkers. I don't know.
Okay, I'll buy it. I just didn't know if it was big studios just trying to have a catchy title. It was just created out of thin air.
As a general rule, that's usually the case. So
I'm going to keep Hollywood accountable on this movie.
Please do.
Just throughout this podcast. We're introduced to these two characters. They are on their homeland. They have nice family lives. Looks like they're somewhere out in Utah. And they get on a bus to go join the Marines and fight for their stolen country, which, again, is just adding another layer to this complicated phenomenon of Code Talkers being utilized in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Ben actually, we find out later, he is the one who encouraged Charlie Whitehorse to join the Marines. Charlie, I don't believe, had any interest. Later on, they do hint that he had the biggest sheep farm in the Four Corners area. So it seemed like he didn't really need to join the cause, but I think the character of Ben Yazzie was just so patriotic.
Yeah, we learn about how patriotic Ben Yazzie is throughout the movie. He named his kid George Washington Yazzie.
Which I thought was a joke. I thought he was like messing with Joe. But I guess that was true for in the movie.
In the movie, it was true, and he wants to be a college professor that teaches American history, and he grew up Catholic. Part of me was like, okay, they almost over-Americanized Ben Yazzie a little bit. And I'm not saying that there aren't patriotic Native Americans out there. There are.
Well, no. I'm a pin you down right here on this comment. Just like I said, keeping Hollywood accountable. Do you think they wanted to make Ben Yazzie more relatable to
no doubt.
the generic
There's
American
no doubt.
audience?
Yeah, there's no doubt.
Because Ben Yazzie doesn't exist.
Right.
There's no Ben Yazzie.
These aren't true characters.
There's no Joe Anders.
Yeah, there's no true characters here.
Just like most movies that are inspired by true events, they pretty much make one character that may take bits and pieces from real people, but these people necessarily weren't real by name.
In no way, shape, or form.
We see a little quick montage of Charlie and Ben in a code-talking school. Seems like they're kind of training in a classroom of code words, or they're being tested of how fast they can decipher code. Because what it seemed like is that they were taking Navajo words, but they don't have words for like helicopters and tanks. So they would say like tortoise or different kinds of like birds of prey for airplanes. So it still was coded within the Navajo language.
Yeah.
So they still need to learn that.
And how to relay messages, right? So if somebody says, hey, direct fire at these coordinates at this target, they'd have to take that, relay it, and then decipher it. So, within a matter of 30 seconds, right, you're in the middle of an active war zone. We're also introduced to a character I got to bring up, Pete Ox Henderson. His name is Ox in the film. What's going to happen is Nick Cage, Joe, wants to get reinstated into the Marines, and they give him a promotion to general, and his job is he's basically the handler for Ben Yazzie. You have a code talker under your care now, and this is your guy. This other guy, Ox, he will be the handler for Charlie Whitehorse.
And Joe is very reluctant and quote unquote his own words, protecting the Indian job at first. He is he's not about it. I'm a good ass Marine. I'm a soldier. I don't want to be on babysitting duty. What the hell's this crap? But the general, the colonel, I don't know rankings. Sorry, military people. You can tweet at Nick later for this. But whoever is above Joe gives him this job. And that's when Joe kind of realizes it's beyond him. It's above him. It's not so much the act itself, but just what the act represents. So the mission is to not protect this guy, but to protect the code. Protect the code, win the war.
Yeah, these guys aren't trained soldiers, right? So if they get captured and interrogated and tortured by the Japanese, chances are they'll break. Essentially, they say the directive is if this guy gets captured, you kill Ben Yazzie. Like, we cannot afford,
which I guess was true. Like, if that happened in World War II,
I mean, I can't say for certain, but it makes sense.
Or if that was like a plot point, like a dramatic theme they needed to create, or a dramatic conflict they needed to create for the movie, I could see it.
I would say it was probably overdone. And we could talk later on about how active did they throw these Navajos into these war zones like we saw in the film? Like, were they frontline people?
I mean, I know they had to be out there with like a radio to relay the messages, boots on the ground, but I don't know how much combat was actually seen by these Native American soldiers.
Right. So we get the tropey Hollywood moment where, they all meet each other. Joe is a hard egg to crack, right? He's just hardened war hero, not hero, survivor.
Been stumbling his chow tray. Yeah. He's spilling Joe's food, spilling coffee on Joe. It's like, no, it's so cringeworthy.
I wrote down he was an infomercial actor. It's like, does your plate slip out of your hands? Whoa! He's just knocking everything over.
They should have put that scene in black and white, and he goes, ah!
Yeah,
introducing tray holders.
It'd work. But Joe's never rude to him because of his heritage. Joe is just like this to everybody. And then we kind of see how the rest of the squadron interacts. Ox likes these guys, right? He seems like a very open-minded guy.
He's from California. He's like cool.
He's from Oxnard. That's why he's called Ox.
Shout out Oxnard, California.
They don't need a shout out. That's
literally the only thing you got going on. We don't have any listeners in Oxnard, so I can talk all the shit I want.
Get wrecked, and we never will.
Now we won't.
Charlie brings, I don't know what the musical instrument is. It's basically like a windpipe.
I think it's just a flute.
Like a flute, yeah. And he plays very traditional Native American music on it. Ox loves it. He goes, oh, that's beautiful. They develop a relationship where Ox plays the harmonica while...
They do a jam session.
Yeah, Charlie plays his flute. They're great. Everyone else seems pretty cool. And then there's one guy, Chick, who...
This guy...
is just a racist.
Yeah, he always plays like a military guy in a bunch of movies.
Typecast.
Chick is played by...
Noah Emmerich.
Google this guy right now, and you will say, oh, yeah, that guy.
Yeah, he was in Truman Show, Miracle. He's just been around.
He played a colonel in the movie Super 8. Have you ever seen Super 8?
I haven't. I hear nothing but great things about it.
We should add that. I love that movie. It's a fun movie. Yeah, this guy usually plays like a military guy. He does embody like the bigot role of like the ignorant American when it comes to these Native American people joining the army. He doesn't want anything to do with them. He doesn't want to learn about them. At least that's how his character arc begins in this movie. He kind of plays the role of American ignorance towards this culture and these people.
And obviously at some point in the movie, he gets saved by Charlie, and he's like, wow, he has this whole revelation about war.
He's like, whoa, that was cool.
And everything else. But
yeah, and this is at this poker scene when we kind of get the first taste of Chick's racism and Ox's cool, chill guy persona. And this is where I saw the first shot of a young Mark Ruffalo, and I was like, Mark Ruffalo? And I was like, Mark Ruffalo. Mark Ruffalo plays Papas, who I guess plays a Greek American.
Yeah, they just call him the Greek. His dream is to, after the war, to go back to Santorini, back to the homeland. He just overly Greek.
There's also a character named Helmstad, who I think goes by Gunny in the movie.
Yes.
I recognize this guy. He's the creepy doctor from Minority Report.
Oh, my goodness. What a pull.
Never saw Minority Report. Didn't really clock Peter Stormare. But after we saw it last season, by the way, if you haven't listened to our Minority Report episode, it's great. Nick is a genius.
Wheels are always turning.
Blown away by his takes on Minority Report. But yeah, I recognize this guy, Peter Stormare. He is, like, I don't know military ranks, I'm sorry, but he is the upperclassman, the supervisor. He's the jefe above Joe.
Well, if you get called Gunny, I'm pretty sure that means you're the gunnery sergeant.
Gunny, Helmstad, Peter Stormare. And there's a couple other side characters that are in the main crew battalion that we focus on. But we don't want to get too attached to them because they might die.
It's a war movie, so you're just like, yeah, they're going to get you attached, and then they're going to, like, oh, we like this guy. Oh, we find out he has a kid. Dead. It's a secret sauce.
Now, to drop a little hint about one of my talking points at the end of this plot talk, we just went over the crew. Nick, taking a quick number crunch ratio, how many white characters are on screen versus Native American characters?
Well, we have 2 Native American characters, so I'm going to say we maybe have 6 or 7 white boys.
Like 6-2?
About.
Yeah, okay. All right. Just going to leave that right there.
I mean, it makes sense, right? It makes sense. If you look at the population of the U.S. military, especially in the 40s, it was about 95% white.
But the movie's called Windtalkers.
Well, the Windtalkers are there. It wasn't a full squad of Windtalkers. It was like
no, I know, but like but I'm saying the focal point is.
I have a whole thing to talk about that. Yeah, we'll get there.
Looking at the big picture, there's a lot of introductions and character developments for certain characters, and what this movie is supposed to be about seems a little lackluster on that part. Just gonna drop that there.
A lot to be said on that, but
yeah, we do get into our first combat scene with these co-talkers. I think a problem with World War II movies is that there is even action movies, they have the pitfall of falling into a stereotype, into tropes, generic scenes. When people think they're going to direct a World War II movie, they think they have to go all in on the action. Mm-hmm. And then we kind of just end up getting the same stuff, like big explosions, gunfire, people on fire, slow motion, people screaming, body parts flying. When sometimes you just kind of want to focus on a certain aspect of the war. Like Christopher Nolan's new movie coming out, Oppenheimer, that's all about the guy who invented the nuclear bomb. That's going to be really interesting because that's all about that.
Yes. Same with 1917, which was a fantastic film.
Yeah. 1917 is World War I, and that just focuses on like 2 guys, right?
2 guys for the first, spoiler alert, the first 20 minutes. Then it's just 1 guy.
Spoilers.
So yeah, big spoiler there.
Oh yeah, Dunkirk is World War II, and that kind of focuses on
a battle. The thing that I would push back on is 4 years earlier, we saw the greatest World War II movie ever made, which was Saving Private Ryan. In my opinion, it's the best World War II movie ever made. So you had a bit of a template of how to make these battles a little more realistic and a little more personal. And they really just went with the bullet hell and bombs and explosions.
Shoot them up, spray bullets, take names, explode, slow motion.
The deaths are so impersonal.
Yeah, I like when it's a little bit more grounded. It's a little bit more. I mean, I've never been in a war zone, but I would use the word realistic. You know, movies like Zero Dark 30. There's no like big musical swells of scores. It's really just like pop, pop, pop. Guy drops dead. the silence really helps out sell the drama. Whereas movies like this, when they kind of go too big, it kind of becomes like a parody of itself, which is why I think we both thought of Tropic Thunder.
And again, Nicolas Cage just like screaming.
Yeah.
At certain points, they reference ammunition and needing to reload, and then at other points, Nicolas Cage is just 45 seconds of holding the trigger down.
That has nothing to do with the movie. That's just Nicolas Cage taking over the scene.
Yes.
With his powers.
You weren't necessarily going for realism here, and I get that, but at the same time, we talk about this in a lot of other movies. There's little things you can do to make it a little more immersive. And when I made the point that the deaths are impersonal, I mean, like when you shoot an enemy soldier, when you shoot one of the Japanese soldiers, instead of them like actually like getting hit and going down, you just see them like throw their hands up in the air.
I'm surprised I didn't hear a Wilhelm scream.
Yeah, seriously.
Missed opportunity.
The Japanese soldiers, they're not very organized. They just keep running at you and getting mowed down. And it's like, okay.
It's like a video game.
Mm-hmm. And this goes on for a long time.
And so in the combat scenes, I just want to point out that Ben is very reluctant and very timid behind the gun, finger on the trigger. He's never killed somebody before, and he gets tested a lot in the first act, second act of this movie.
He freezes up.
There's a couple scenes where Joe is yelling at him like, kill this person, kill him. Joe's like a killing machine. Ben's not. He's a code talker.
But Charlie apparently is a murder machine. Him with that knife?
No, he's a badass.
Dude, he
skinned sheeps, so he knows how to work a knife.
Charlie had no issues getting into it.
I love the relationship of Ox and Charlie Whitehorse. That was the buddy cop comedy that I needed more of.
I agree.
I needed more of that dynamic. Joe and Ben were just too much clashing heads there. I just needed more Ox and Charlie. Charlie and Ox. Classic shenanigans.
They weren't necessarily even clashing heads. Ben was never disagreed with them. Ben Yazzie was just trying to get along with him, trying to get him to open up, and Joe she's just too hardened by what he's seen. Now, this scene here, it embodies my issue with the movie and what you were talking about with the last scene. So there's a part where there's a satchel that holds explosives, and they need to throw it into this enemy pillbox. It's like a pillbox. It's like a garrisoned area. And I believe Mark Ruffalo's character was going to do it, but Nick Cage goes, no. And he's like, give it to me. And he's going to run out and do it. And what you were saying where you're like, this movie is called Windtalkers. Like, why are there not more? No, this movie is just exposition of Nicolas Cage. That's all this movie is.
This is Con Air 2.
At every turn, at every opportunity, it just turns into a Nicolas Cage is going to do this. He's the war hero. He takes on the most dangerous stuff. He is the first guy out there. And it just turns into like Nicolas Cage's characters. We're just okay. We get it. Like what about the rest of these characters? Like you said before in the previous scene, what about the Windtalkers?
Yep. No, this is going to be this is a theme in this movie. It's they do a lot of focus on the combat and the heroics of Joe Anders.
Mm-hmm.
And they could have used a little bit more code talking scenes. I mean, I'll bring up this. I loved the racial tension scenes. I think that's interesting. That's definitely something that was probably a conflict back then. There's a scene where Chick runs into Ben Yazzie. He's like kind of rinsing off in the river. And they're alone, so Chick's like, oh, cool, I can rough up this guy because I don't like him because I'm a racist. They get into like a physical altercation. Chick says, oh, I thought he was one of the Japanese soldiers. They look so much alike, so what do you expect me to do? He's not wearing his uniform. Ben corrects him. He says, I'm not an Indian, I'm a Navajo. Goes into the specifics and says, of the Bitter Water people. Born for the Towering House Clan. Now, I don't know what that means, but sounds awesome.
Sounds cool.
And like I said, like when we call Native Americans American Indians, there's so much culture and tribes to there's so many layers to it. Like we can't even begin to decipher it. So that's something that Ben drops onto Chick. And Joe does clock that because later on he gets awarded a Silver Star for, again, someone recognizing his heroics, but he does credit Ben Yazzie. And he says, well, actually, I couldn't have done it with Private Yazzie over here. The guy says, oh, yeah, the Indian. And then Nicolas Cage says, oh, actually, he's Navajo. of the Bitterwater clan, born for the towering house. So he does recognize that. So those were the scenes that I thought we need a little bit more of.
Yeah.
Like the respect and the acknowledgement of these characters kind of gave me like, Remember the Titans vibes.
Mm-hmm.
Ox kind of played like not Frankie Stechino. What the hell's that guy's name? The big guy in Remember the Titans.
Oh, Louis?
Kind of like a Louis or like a Sunshine. Like Ox was like the guy who's like, yeah, let's like, we're equals. We're in this together. And then, of course, you had like the other racist football players that weren't cool with the African-American students joining the team. So I kind of needed a little bit, I wanted a little bit more of that and less shoot 'em up action, because this movie was about the Code Talkers. Obviously, the integration or conflicts they had with like racism is a little bit more interesting to me than people blowing up in slow motion, as much as I love that.
Again, it's just a very one-man centric story, being in Nicolas Cage, right? Even the code talking scenes, it's like Nicolas Cage giving the directives, and he needs to shake Ben Yazzie out of his stupor and like, come on, right? Like Nick Cage is still the hero in all of these scenes.
There is one scene where Ben Yazzie does step up. This is after the altercation with Chick, when Chick says, "Oh, how am I supposed to tell them apart? He looks exactly like the Japanese." And Ben Yazzie looks at a dead Japanese soldier and he says, "Oh, you know what? You're right. I do look like them, which is why I'm going to put on a disguise and go steal a radio." So this is the rise of Ben Yazzie and a heroic act by him. Anders is like, no. And then Gunny's like, oh, hold up. Let him cook. Let me see where he wants to do with this. Gunny's like, hell, I mean, fuck, I'm not going to stop you if you want to put on his uniform and go undercover. But then, like you were saying, Nick Cage kind of has to one up him and be like, oh, only if I can go with him. He does have a mission.
He can't let him.
He does have a mission to protect Ben. But at the same time, it's kind of like, oh, hold on, I'm a good Marine. I want to go help too.
Yeah.
I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that he did only because it's his mission and obligation to either protect Ben or to murder him if he gets captured. So bold plan. They go in, infiltrate this Japanese radio area, the little bunker. We used to take those over all the time in conflict, Vietnam conflict, global terror, when you kind of got into those little sandbaggy canopy tent bunkers with the radio. So they do infiltrate that successfully. There is another moment where Ben is reluctant to kill a Japanese soldier. Nicolas Cage is John Wicking these fools in the trenches, but they do make it out alive. They get the radio, they make the call, they code talk some coordinates for an airstrike. After this is where Nicolas Cage gets the Silver Star Award and recognizes the heroics of Ben Yazzie as well, which I thought was a really good scene. Something we could have used more of.
I did as well. Like there was actual character growth.
Yeah.
And that night at camp is actually when Joe and Ben start to grow a friendship. Joe's drunk. He opens up to Ben about what happened to him in the opening scene of the movie, where everyone under his command had died. He talks about how he doesn't even, he throws away all the medals he's given because you don't get, medals for living. They give medals to the people who die. He has this it's supposed to be wildly emotional. I don't think Nick Cage sells it, to be honest.
I'll say this about the scene. I did like, it did keep me on my toes. Joe starts laughing like he's about to tell something funny. And Ben's like, yeah, tell me something funny. Like, I want to connect with you. But then he goes on a drunken rant about, oh, I threw this medal in the ocean because they gave it to me because I was the only one who survived and everyone else died. But they also gave them medals. So you kind of see the just kind of jaded side of Joe to this. He's like married to the Marine game, but he doesn't even like it. At least he's not giving me any evidence that he likes it, because he keeps saying like, oh, I'm a really good Marine. I follow orders, but everyone died, but at least I did my job. I hate my job, but I can't stop doing it. So there's definitely a fat inner conflict that Joe Enders is going through, which is more evidence that this seems like a Joe Enders movie than a Ben Yazzie movie.
Yep. Ben's telling Joe about some of the Native American rituals that they have. Like after the first battle, they do almost like a prayer. I guess that's what you'd call it, a prayer, a chant, a ritual that where they put the dead to rest. Even though they're the enemies, if you don't put them to rest, they come back. Their spirit can't move on to the afterlife. Joe's obviously doesn't believe any of this. He's skeptical, but when he's drunk, Ben puts him to bed and then does like a Native American prayer over him. And so you're starting to see the two cultures overlap a little bit. It's almost like Ben is bringing him into his culture. At certain points, Ben's like, oh, let me have a cigarette with you. Let me do XYZ. Let me into your culture. I'll bring you into mine.
Speaking of cultures, they have Ben Yazzie explain Navajo cultures, but like you said, he's pretty Americanized. And we learned that he grew up Catholic. And probably what might be my favorite scene of the movie, they're in this like village that is declared safe, but they still have to like go in and patrol it, right? There's like those families that live in those houses, but the American soldiers kind of stroll in and patrol the place. There is a nice scene with Nicolas Cage and Adam Beach in this house. Nicolas Cage's character of Joe, he draws this like Catholic church out of like flour or something on a table. It's very good. And there's this whole scene about their childhood or past experiences growing up Catholic. And we're just like, oh, I guess Ben Yazzie, Navajo, was also raised Catholic. He tells a story about how he was punished in Catholic school for speaking Navajo. And Joe says, well, they sure are letting you speak Navajo now. And then Ben laughs like, oh, isn't that funny how life works? But Joe doesn't, because Joe realizes how messed up like the hypocrisy is of the treatment of Ben that this country has done to him, because they punish him for being true to his culture and his history. And then they're like, oh, sorry, we actually really need you, and we're going to exploit that. So Joe, being like a victim of the system for his role, he begrudgingly follows orders, but then after the fact, he's pissed off at himself for following orders because it kind of battles his moral compass. He actually recognizes that for Ben, and I think that kind of dawns on Ben in this scene where he's like, oh, you know what? Yeah, I am just being exploited for who I am, and I'm just kind of part of the system. I think this was my favorite scene. It was like really interesting, open dialogue about the whole phenomenon of the Code Talker operation.
And right after the scene, Nicolas Cage goes to his superior and says, I can't do my duty anymore, which is basically, if something happens to Ben, I don't have the heart to kill him because he's my friend now. His commander tells him, sorry, no dice. Like, this is war. Get over it. But Joe puts his hands on his commander and he's like, take me off of this detail. Take me off of this detail. I can't do it because this friendship has now blossomed. And then what happens conveniently, as it always does in this movie? Ambush. Japanese ambush on this little village.
Dude, we be ambushing up in this movie. And once again, we are just thrown into a very loud battle scene, explosions, people on fire. I think this is the scene where someone has like a explosive backpack or like a flamethrower on their back.
Yeah.
There was a lot of production and money and time spent on this scene of seeing this guy be set ablaze into a skeleton inferno in slow motion. Really just World War porn.
Yeah.
War porn.
Nicolas Cage even has to walk up and shoot him because to put him out of his misery. Just no bueno.
Yeah. We do come to a scene where Charlie Whitehorse fucking does a badass knife throw right past Chick and saves his life. And then Chick is like, what? This guy's actually good? I'm going to stop being racist. But that was the most gangster thing that happened in this movie. Unfortunately, moments later, Private Charlie Whitehorse does get apprehended.
Well, what happens first is him and Ox are fighting, right? Him and his buddy. They're fighting.
Oh my God, I forgot about this.
All of a sudden, one of these Japanese soldiers pulls out a samurai sword and just decapitates him.
Yeah.
Just decapitates Ox in front of Charlie. And Charlie just loses it, takes his knife out. He must take down 8 or 9 Japanese soldiers. But like you said,
Charlie was mad. You just killed my harmonica buddy? Big mistake, pal.
Death.
So he does get overpowered and captured and kind of grappled by 4 or 5 Japanese soldiers. I'm just going to bring this up now. How did they know the Japanese soldiers are profiling the American soldiers. They just know they're code talkers. They know the operation.
Well, earlier in the movie, they had referenced this because they had a picture of a Native American who the Japanese got a hold of and basically strung up and tortured to death. And Nicolas Cage is like, well, what's the problem? They're like, he wasn't a code talker. But then other parts in the movie, they're listening into the American broadcast where the Navajo are talking. And they're like, what language is this? Are they even talking? Like what? So it's like, but if you know it's Navajo, you would know it's Native American. I don't know. But it is told in the movie that the Japanese soldiers are looking for these Navajo.
What if it was a Filipino guy or a Latino guy? It's just like, what? Like, you just got to take every like olive skinned soldier and be like, you speak this language?
At a certain point, wouldn't you try to get a spy into the United States, go to a Navajo reservation and go like, hey, man, I'll go give you $10 million if you'll just come and help us out here?
I mean, I don't think they really know about the Navajo people. Because like the whole language and dialect was never written down, at least back then. It was all just word of mouth, passed down generation.
But then here comes the pitfall of, okay, well then how did they know to apprehend the Native Americans?
Well, that's what I'm saying. How do they know who's Native American, who's not, and what Native Americans are?
I do not know.
All right. I think that was one of my nitpicks, but this was a perfect time to bring it up.
I think that is a pitfall.
Charlie gets captured, and Joe sees this and has the very reluctant idea to, unfortunately, have to kill Charlie, whips out a grenade and hucks it at him. I thought Charlie was going to live because he does like drop kick, or he's being held up by soldiers, and then he kind of lifts up his legs and kicks a guy into the grenade. I thought that guy blew up, and then Charlie survived, and everyone else was concussed, but White Horse don't make it.
And you could tell it kind of shakes Joe. Joe and Charlie catch eyes. Charlie kind of looks at him and gives him a nod like, yeah, I know what you have to do it.
Yeah, I don't think it was like a nod of approval. It was more just like in his eyes, he knew what had to be done.
Yeah.
Don't do it, but I know you have to do it.
Knowing World War II history, I would probably rather take a bullet to the head than try to survive Japanese internment.
Yeah, no. I'll take the grenade for 200.
It's almost a mercy kill at that point in the game. But
what is a mercy kill?
All things said and done, the ambush is over, the battle is over, and Joe's just kind of sitting there. You could tell he's upset.
He's just even more hardened. He's just an even harder boiled egg at this point. He is just, the boiled egg is a rock.
This is why I can't get close to Ben, because I would have to do this. And so my whole world is shattered so then he's kind of a dick to Ben, because Ben comes over and goes, where's Charlie? And Joe goes, oh, he's right over there. And Ben obviously thinks like, oh, okay, he's safe. And he walks over there and he sees him on the ground. And Joe looks at him and he goes, I did it.
I can't find Ox or Whitehorse.
He's over there.
This is supposed to be a secure area. What happened?
I killed him. I took my grenade and I threw it and I blew him up.
He asked why. He's like, why'd you do that? And then Joe says, I had to because it was the mission. So you can see he's still struggling with following orders and then dealing with the results of following those orders. And again, kind of an inner conflict with his morals and his conscience. But it was a good scene up until Ben pulled a gun on him.
Yeah, Ben starts beating him up.
Joe gives us the old, like, do it. Like, it's like, okay, this is way too dramatic. Ben, the timid guy on the trigger, all of a sudden becomes hella vengeful and murderous towards his friend and just pulls out a pistol. And then Ben goes way too aggro, way too quickly. And then Joe just says like, yeah, I'm suicidal now. And I was just like, this could have been a good scene, but it wasn't.
What the hell is wrong with you?
Come on. You can do it.
Yeah, just do it. I'm dead inside.
Didn't do it for me for that one.
I'm in the same boat.
And this segues us into the third act. Ben's realization of what's going on really shakes him to his core, and Joe is just dying even more on the inside. So Yazi goes from being Sound like a sportscaster. So Yazi's coming up to the plate.
He's got a look in his eye.
Yazi goes yabo.
He all of a sudden turns into this super soldier.
Yeah, he goes from timid guy to John Wick at the end. He is bodying soldiers. He got really good with a gun.
Yeah.
Pop, 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 pop. Pulls out a knife. Boom, boom. Stab, stab, stab. I was like, dang, okay. John Woo in the house.
And then obviously we get the moment with Joe where he goes, "It won't bring your friends back. All this murdering won't make you whole."
Yeah, so again, we're kind of focusing a little bit too much on Joe's story arc here.
Like Joe was the victim. When Charlie died, the movie made it so that Joe was the victim.
It's like Charlie took a grenade. Ox got decapitated a couple scenes ago. Let's not forget.
And
about
Ben
that.
just lost his childhood best friend. Like this should be a huge moment of introspection for Ben, but instead it's we feel bad for Joe.
This takes place in the last war scene, I believe. Joe gives him the old, like, it won't bring your friends back, aka I am now reconciling my inner conflict with my trauma that I dealt with in the beginning of the movie. I know being a violent badass is not the answer, but protecting the ones that are here is the answer. There's a tank missile that gets shot. Fucking Joe, who again, this is just Nicolas Cage taking over the set. I don't even think they knew they were rolling, but like he knows he has a spidey sense that this missile's coming, and Joe shoves Ben forward and kind of tucks and rolls with him, and they dodge the missile. It does land 5 feet away from them, but they are fine.
They're good.
Yeah.
Joe's ruptured eardrum is like already, he's like, yeah, what more can you do to it?
No harm, no foul there. But like a goddamn cat with those reflexes, shoves Ben out the way. Again, this is the heroics of Joe Anders. And then Ben's like, whoa, you just saved my life. I guess you are a good person. So it kind of seemed like some weird, I don't know, the screenwriters, the director thought this was like a good redemption arc.
Yeah.
For Joe. It's just it's an odd choice. It's a little bit more on the action side when we could have just used like a good old, like,
heart to heart,
I don't know, story.
In the battle, they both end up getting shot. Joe on his shoulder. Ben takes a bullet to both legs, so he can't walk. And Joe's like, no one else is dying. We
get another trope of Ben and Joe on the ground. They're like, God damn it. I guess this is the end. And I was just like, this is like another parody I'm watching of a war movie.
After these Japanese marksmen just took out your legs and shoulders, now with Ben on his back running away, they can't hit shit.
Cover me, you limp dick fuck-ups.
And so he's running, they fall, and we have this touching-ish moment where they're surrounded, there's too many of them. Joe has his gun out, and Ben takes his hand and points the gun towards his own face, like, you know what you have to do, it's okay. And of course, Joe, being the hero that he is, no, not doing it.
Yeah, instead of killing Ben, we got the white guy saving the day, baby, like we always do. Haha.
But they were able to call in an airstrike before all this went down. So, of course, with no time left, the airstrike hits. And in all the chaos, Joe gets shot in the chest.
And then Joe dies. I thought we were going to have a Hollywood ending of our hero making it out, but he does die.
Real quick, I thought Joe was going to say something really profound in his last words. He ends up just saying a Hail Mary, right? The Catholic prayer. I thought he was going to give him something like really profound.
So again, that's like a weird decision. It seemed like a last minute write-in that he is now okay with religion and belief. It seemed like he was kind of had a lot of pushback on religion, whether it was like Catholic religion or Ben's Navajo culture prayer coming into play. It seemed like he was just like resenting religion and beliefs for whatever reason. They never explained that. And then they kind of just said like, he overcame that. He's saying a prayer as he's dying.
I thought maybe Ben would do a Native American ritual over him, or he would say like, hey, finally right back to that love interest we haven't heard from in 45 minutes or something. Something about, you're my friend, whatever.
Yeah.
if you would have said you are my friend Ben Yazi of the Navajo tribe, it's his title. But yeah, they just all of a sudden bring the Catholic part back into it. And I'm like, that, okay. Seemed off.
Yeah, it seemed like they prioritized certain things in this movie and didn't prioritize other things, like writing. The movie ends with Ben back at his home. I think there's a campfire going. There's smoke going up in the air. He is doing a prayer. He is mourning Joe and recognizing Joe. We mourn Joe, but not Charlie.
Yeah, we never mourn Charlie.
Why? Because this movie is about Joe Enders and not the Code Talkers, and that's plot talk for Windtalkers, baby.
Boom. All right.
Do you have any nitpicks? Nitpicks.
We covered them through the plot talk.
Okay, well, I have an honest to God nitpick, and it was how quiet the talking scenes were versus how fucking loud the battle scenes were. It'd be a quiet talking scene, and then
ambush.
And then my ears would just get blown off by like a gunshot or an explosion, similar to Joe's experience in the beginning of the movie. So shout out, Joe. I feel your pain. I had my volume cranked up to like 65 because the sound mixing was so quiet on the dialogue.
His name was Joe Enders, South Philadelphia.
I'm like, grab the controller. I'm like jamming it down to 25%. I'm like, fuck, dude, who mixed this? I watched it on HBO Max. Sorry, I watched it on Max. So I figure they would have normalized the sound.
Yeah, it's not HBO Max. It's been rebranded.
We're on our way to TJ Maxx, ladies and gentlemen. It's coming.
My nitpicks were the couple we brought up throughout. One, I don't know why these guys, if they're so important and they can't get captured, why are they always on the front? Like, they're always the first ones in. And Joe Enders, as the protector of this guy, is always putting himself into the clutches of death. I also don't understand why the whole squad wouldn't have the same Joe's directives are very secretive. He's not allowed to talk about it. But what if Joe gets shot and killed and then Ben gets captured? Like, wouldn't you want like a backup guy in the squad who can take out Ben? It's just very secretive thing.
Like a little chain of command. It's like, Joe watches Ben, but someone's got to watch Joe, and someone's got to watch that guy, and then someone's got to watch that guy.
I also don't know why this whole thing was so secretive. Like, I would just tell the Navajo guys, like, hey, here's the deal. If you get captured, they're going to torture you to death until you give up our secrets. So we're just going to mercy kill at that point in the game. Are you in or are you out? Yeah,
did they not disclaim that to them? I don't know about real life, but I'm asking for the movie. Like, did they? I don't know if that was a conflict in reality, but like in the movie, did they say that?
No, they never said that to the Navajo, that was part of it, because at that point, Ben would have understood why Joe threw the grenade at Charlie. It would have been like, I get it. We understood this going into it. But it's like this weird, like, secretive tension.
I'd be overreacting like some
Yeah, so it's just very
high schooler.
Odd. So that one, and then obviously stuff like the ammunition, the amount of times they're like, we're low on ammo, and then Nick Cage stands up and just sprays 5 clips of a machine gun, and you're like, I mean, were you low on ammo?
If there's one thing you can count on, it is Nick counting bullets in movies. He will hold you accountable.
I just want to know. Also,
realism.
The Charlie death scene, I feel like, because after Nick Cage threw that grenade, the battle was pretty much over. Like, that was the final part. I just don't believe they couldn't have saved Charlie. Like, that was the last option. It was just Nick Cage there with a grenade, and there's no other option than just to blow everybody up. Like, it just wasn't compelling to me.
Yeah, he has legs. Get up and go stab those guys. Go wrestle him away.
Something, yeah. Give him a chance, anything.
I don't think he was constricted by anything. He wasn't like stuck in mud or like tied up.
Yeah, I mean, his gun was out of ammo, but that never stopped him before.
Dude, just go John Wick the situation. You've done it 5 times already.
Like, I need to have his death wasn't impactful to me, because if it didn't feel like this is the last resort, it felt like this is the first option. Like, 4 Japanese guys have him. Sorry.
Grenade.
That
is nitpicks for Windtalkers. I have one talking point. It's not a question. It's a statement. This movie is whitewashed.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, 2002 Hollywood.
That was a main criticism of this movie. That was a big point that was brought up because there was actually Code Talker veterans who saw this movie and pretty much said what we're saying, like they focus too much on combat scenes and not enough on the Code Talkers. And after reading that, I was like, yeah, it totally makes sense. Like that's why this movie kind of fell a little flat for me because the title's misleading.
Absolutely.
That aspect is in the background, and it kind of just seemed like the studios made that the excuse to make this movie, and they're just like, we're going to make a action World War II movie.
Yeah, exactly. In my notes, I was writing down, I said, this movie is way too one-man centric. You know, good war movies, they introduce us to some of the other characters, but at no point do I have an affinity for some of these characters, right? You go back to Saving Private Ryan. There's a few movies, recent movies that have done this. If you ever watched the one with Brad Pitt and Shia LaBeouf, Fury, right? You get to know the whole squad, and then all of a sudden their deaths are wildly impactful. The most impactful deaths wasn't even Joe, it was Charlie and Ox, because we like them. We got to see them develop a relationship, and you're like, okay.
There was that one guy that's like, oh, I'm afraid I'm not going to make it back. Mark Ruffalo, can you please bring my wedding ring to my wife if I die? And he's like, don't talk like that. And then he dies in the next scene, and you're just like,
not impacted. So I 100% agree with you. It was so focused on Joe Enders that I don't think there was a scene without him. I think every single scene had Joe. Like there was no scene of the other soldiers, and if there was, Joe Enders just popped in real quick.
Well, I gotta do something.
I don't know how much he got paid for this film, but it looked like they were trying to milk every dollar per screen time out of this.
Now, where is this on the Nicolas Cage timeline? I think this is before it became a meme, obviously.
Yeah, he was.
I think it became a meme. You said it was the movie Next.
That's where I mark it down.
Which I think is like a 2005 movie. So this is 2002 we're talking about here. So.
Yeah, Face Off, I believe, was like 97.
Yeah, so early 2000s, we're looking at Gone in 60 Seconds. Windtalkers is right here. Matchstick Men. Oh, National Treasure. Hell yeah, 2004. That's a movie. Lord of War, 2005. I think I like that movie based on memory.
It's a good one.
The Weatherman, that was like a little kind of niche character role for him.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that movie, The World Trade Center. I think it's with Michael Pena. I never saw that. Oh, you know what? The Wicker Man. I think that's the beginning of we're making fun of Nicolas Cage. We're laughing at Nicolas Cage era because we got Wicker Man followed by Ghost Rider. He played Fu Manchu in Grindhouse. And then Next is right there in 2007. Bangkok Dangerous, Knowing. Yeah, this is kind of like where he maybe had a low point in the career. And then he kind of comes back in Kick-Ass. We know you're kind of a joke, but we're going to put you in Kick-Ass because you're Nicolas Cage. So that, I'll call it the self-aware era.
The self-aware.
Yeah, I think this is like kind of like the peak of Nicolas Cage's marquee value. Coming off Face Off, coming off Con Air, The Rock, on 60 Seconds, all these high-profile action movies. So, I would believe that a lot of money went to Nick Cage, which is why the writers in the studio felt very compelled to feature a lot of him.
A whole lot of him.
Yeah, John Woo making an action movie. Like I said in the beginning, the movie Smoke Signals, if this movie is directed by Chris Eyre, I think we would have had a more intimate, character-driven story that would focus on the Code Talkers.
It's just a weird choice because you could still have that character. I mean, Nick Cage's character could still be there. Just dial it back.
If he got like an Ox treatment in this movie, where he was like a main side character, or you can even call Ox a main character. He was very important, and like we said, we felt very touched. We were emotionally saddened when he got decapitated by a freaking katana that came out of nowhere. Yeah, if you gave Joe like the Ox treatment, it would have been way more impactful while not losing focus of who this movie is about, with different direction. And I think the studios just back then, where they're like, you can't sell a movie about Native American soldiers. You have to have a big marquee name attached, which was Nicolas Cage.
I think you hit the nail on the head a few minutes ago when you said they really just wanted to make a World War II movie with the big action and the fight, and then they just wanted to give it a new twist. And the new twist was, somebody got hold of the Code Talker story, and they were like, "Oh, we can fold this into a movie, and this is going to add a whole fun dimension layer to it." And it could if you execute.
It's pretty much just like a subplot.
It is
in this movie.
You could take Ben and Charlie and just replace them with two scrawny kids from Brooklyn who are the new guys in the squad, and you could basically carry the same storyline. The code talking is not that big of a storyline.
It's not featured a whole lot.
It's just an excuse for the Native Americans to be there.
Yeah.
And again, it would be one thing if they were able to nail the interpersonal conflict angle and then the redemption arc, but they don't.
No. So I think we have a pretty good idea of how we feel about this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And we have pretty good grasp about how this movie was handled. So, Nick, if you were to sell this to me in an elevator pitch, if you had to pitch this to me, how would you pitch it? Give me a sarcastic selling point. Off the rip, off the cuff. We have no notes, ladies and gentlemen, on this one. We are very busy these days.
I would look at somebody and I'd say, "Hey, have you heard the story about the Code Talkers?" Well, them. This is about Joe Enders.
I would say, "Hey, have you heard a story about the Code Talkers?" Well, them. This is about Nicolas Cage.
Final review. Fight.
Here's what the other guys are saying about Windtalkers. Coming in hot, we got Rotten Tomatoes. Critic score, 33%. That's a green splat. And for the audience, we have a 50%. That is a green spilt popcorn bucket.
Oof.
Waltzing on over to Metacritic, we have the Metascore from the critics. They're giving this a 51 out of 100.
Okay.
And the user score, the fans for Metacritic, a little more forgiving at a 6.1 out of 10. So that's the first kind of, this movie has a little bit of life. Let's see what IMDb has to say about it. The exact same thing. 6.1 out of 10. Do you have a laughable log line for me, followed by some popcorn points, followed by just a summary of your thoughts?
I'm doing this right off the top of my head here, buddy. So
I will too. I'm going to think about mine while you do yours. So I'm happy you have to go first this week.
If I had a log line, my laughable log line would be when two Navajo men are tasked with decoding and decrypting codes for the United States military. Joe Enders shows up and saves the day. 4.1 popcorn points for me. It's just, this movie's a lot of empty calories, man. I do enjoy the action sequences, so that's fun. Nicolas Cage was okay. The rest of the acting, I thought, was pretty well. They did pretty well for what they were given as far as the script and the direction of the movie. I think Adam Beach did a great job. The rest of the crew, Ruffalo, Noah Emmerich, Peter Stormare, did a good job. Roger Willie as Charlie did a great job as well. So I thought the acting was there. Again, I respect the action sequences were fun and engaging, albeit loud, like you were saying.
So loud.
It really does get tired just having the same main character on the screen all the time, always being the hero, not getting the character development that you want, and then add in the little random B, C, and D plots that they're kind of shoehorned in. Like, oh, we need a love story. We need a love interest. Like, you didn't need that at all. That's just a lot of random decisions made that didn't need to be made. So going back to how we started this podcast, I still love the Code Talkers story. I think it's a great story as far as the true events go, but just the overly Nicolas Cagey nature of this movie didn't make it very enjoyable for me. So 4.1.
I hear your 4.1, and I will raise it my score after I totally read out my log line, which I'm not typing up right now. Screw it. I'm going to do it live. The Navajo language is used as a coded messaging system in World War II, where Navajo members are brought in to serve their country. And here comes Nicolas Cage about to kill a bunch of Japanese soldiers with infinite ammo. 4.3 popcorn points. 4.3. I'm looking at my ratings here. Stealth, well, I gave a 4.1. In good conscience, I can't put this below stealth. I think stealth is just all action with no substance. At least this movie had a base layer of substance, given it was supposed to be about the Code Talker operation. Like we touched upon in the beginning, such an interesting phenomenon. These people are here. They're living on this land. It gets stolen. They get ignored. They get belittled. They get mistreated. And then, this country needs them, not really in like an honorable way. I mean, I'm not there. It just seems like they kind of got exploited for their unique language that is off the grid. It's not written. It's off record. You have veterans who are from Navajo Nation that are willing to serve this operation because they are patriotic and they understand, like, this is the country I live in. So no matter what, this is what I'm saying. I just could have used more of that dialogue from those characters, like how they felt about serving. Let's just say, for example, you had Ben and Charlie talking. Like Ben would say, like, "Oh, isn't this great? Like we're serving our country," and Charlie could say, "Like, well, it's not our not our country anymore." And he could have gotten to a whole conversation about that, bringing up all these interesting ideas and layers to what
not
this
for
operation.
2002 audiences.
I mean, that would have been way more engaging and interesting to me than all the slow motion explosion scenes. And like you said, the flops. So much LeBron James action happening in this movie with people dying. It was a lot of flailing, a lot of flopping, too much action, too much fireworks. And I love action. We're action movie guys. But at the end of the day, movies are about stories and they're about characters. You've grown to love these characters, not the action that they're thrown into. So this movie definitely falls flat on its face. And again, I'm going to point my finger at studios and at Hollywood. You had a golden opportunity with this idea, and you just had piss poor execution. You just redirected the whole movie. I get false advertising. The movie's called Windtalkers. All I get is Nicolas Cage with a gun killing Japanese soldiers. This is stale popcorn from both me and you being in the fours.
Last point, this is the thing about action movies for me. When this is supposed to be based on a true story, you have different parameters in my mind. When you have like a movie like Taken or John Wick, where you understand this is a highly fictional person and they could just mow through armies of people, it's a lot of fun. When you're telling me, oh no, this guy is nothing special, he's just a Marine, and one guy's body count, like he took out like a third of the Japanese military. Like his body count is just, he stacks them all up. It's like, who is this guy?
He's Joe Enders. And you remember the name. Just how Ben did at the end of the movie. He said, "I'll tell stories of Joe Enders and how he was my friend." That is the movie Joe Enders and the Japanese, brought to you by whatever studio greenlit this and thought it was a good idea to make it about Joe Enders, a fictional character who did not exist. How do you feel about it after watching it for a second time?
Probably don't need to watch it ever again.
And that's the thing about growing up. You kind of appreciate character development and stories over explosions. I'll take explosions, but I need a little bit of balance. I'm getting old. I can't do it.
Give me a little something.
Please follow us again on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter at Just Play It Podcast for Instagram and YouTube, at Just Play It Pod for Twitter. And you should join us next week while we stay in the year 2002 with Paul Giamatti.
Oh boy.
And he could be blue for a certain point in this movie.
Well, that could be any movie.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're heading gone. We're getting out of here. I will see you in the trenches of our next movie.
We'll see you then.